Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit.
All praises, all praises, all praises to the Almighty Creator of infinity, eternity, the universe, and all there is. This is Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit. Hello, family. We are back together again at the knee of wisdom. We are unveiling prophecy due to knowledge in the earth being increased. All praises and peace, harmony, and petitions of protection to the brothers and sisters of the diaspora scattered to the four winds of the earth due to the sub-Saharan, the Silk Road, the Indian, and transatlantic slave trades, and to the brothers and sisters of Detroit. We are here for continual cranial development and mental marination as we are giving more definition to our history as Hebrews, giving more clarity, blowing away the smoke of ignorance and filling in the potholes of history as to our migration from the Holy Land into the interiors of Africa, where we were then captured by native Africans and invading Mohammedans or Arabs, as well as transacted to the Portuguese and the emerging European powers of the Renaissance period. So we have source material where any of the doubters can go back and perform the research at their discretions and scoff and scorning. This is directed to the so-called Kemetic conscious community, as well as the European Christians who have the veil of white supremacy about their eyes and ears, spiritually and carnally. So we began. This is going to be a walkthrough of sources that outlines the tribes of Israel from the destruction of their homeland by the Romans in 70 AD. So for the Kemetic conscious Pan-African community and the so-called Christian church of the Western European philosophies and theologies, let us begin with finding out what happened with the tribe of Judah, the very tribe of the Holy Messiah, the Christ himself, after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. Before Black people were colonized by Europeans, we were known as members of the tribe of Judah. One of the largest slave ports in West Africa, where many of our ancestors were stolen, was labeled the Kingdom of Judah. There's a 1747 map of Africa created by an English cartographer named Edward Bowen, 1693 or 1694 through 1767. His map shows specifically where the ancestors of many African Americans, so-called Black folks, but actually the house of Israel, where they came from. So we have a map where we can see outlined at the slave coast, the kingdom of Judah. All right. The kingdom of Judah is or was in what is now called Benin. So the kingdom of Judah is in the current African country of Benin, family. According to the Washington Post, it was once West Africa's largest slave port. So a lot of us were parceled out into the transatlantic slave trade through this avenue, family. In the 1870s, a French public research university called the University of Montpellier put out a book on geography. So before we go into these sources, family, we are respecters of time frames, which is historical thresholds of consideration and connection. So we start at the destruction of our homeland, 70 AD, ending with 1865, the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, or the enslavement in America. So 1776 was the official formulation of the United States as a country. 100 and some odd years later, the so-called African Americans, or the House of Israel, was emancipated. And we will fill in various years in between. In the 1870s, a French public research university called the University of Montpellier put out a book on geography. The book talks about the kingdom of Judah, stating, Judah is an old city frequented since the 16th century by the Portuguese slavers who gave it its name. Its inhabitants were said to be Judaic, and they were indeed considered as a remnant of scattered tribes of Israel. So in the modern day country of Benin, where the kingdom of Judah was, there were remnants of the scattered tribes of the house of Israel. In other words, the black people stolen and brought to America are the indigenous people of Israel, also known as Israelites, from the kingdom of Judah. Now, many people today believe the Israelites were or are white or Middle Eastern. Over 1,000 years ago, around 100 AD, a Roman historian named Tacitus wrote about the race of Jews in his book, Histories. So we have another source family, Tacitus. And the book is called Histories. In the book, Tacitus wrote about the Jews, saying, many assure us they were a race of Ethiopian origin. So this Roman historian has likened the Jews to Ethiopians, which are inhabitants of Eastern Africa, right across the Red Sea from the Arabian Peninsula, or the original homeland, family. An English historian named Godfrey Higgins stated, according to many testimonies, the inhabitants of Sudan, Egypt, Arabia, Palestine, Western Asia, and India were Ethiopians, therefore Africans. So we have an expanse of geographical territory of where Ethiopians, or so-called Africans, resided. And as we know today, Palestine has become another name for the land of Israel. Now, Abraham was the father of the Israelite race. Well, actually, it was Jacob. No, Jacob is Israel. So his father was Isaac. So Abraham was the grandfather of the Israelite race. Abraham was from Chaldea. Historians have proven that the Chaldeans were black. The British historian Godfrey Higgins again wrote in the 17th century in his book Anacapolis about the early inhabitants of Chaldea. I admit with great difficulty the theory of all the early astronomical knowledge of the Chaldees having been acquired or invented by his race, and that the Chaldeans were originally Negroes. We also know that the ancient Israelites looked like the ancient Egyptians, who were clearly black. In 1876, a French geographer named Elisée Reclus also wrote about the same kingdom of Judah on the slave coast in West Africa in his book called The Earth and Its Inhabitants. So 1876 is 11 years after the Negroes in America were emancipated family. So what does he say? He wrote, known to Europeans by various names of Theta, Hereda, Wida, the old writers called it Judah, and its inhabitants were said to be Jews. There was also a community in Timbuktu, Mali. In 1820, an English traveler named James Bray published in his book an account of Timbuktu and Hausa. So 1820 family. The book states, this place is reported to be inhabited by one of the lost tribes of Israel, possibly an immigration from the tribe of Judah. Yehuda in African Arabic signifies Judah. Yehudi signifies Jew. It is not impossible that many of the lost tribes of Israel may be found dispersed in the interior regions of Africa. El-Hajj Abin Salam Shabini, collected and formatted by James Gray Jackson, an account of Timbuktu and Hausa, 1820. Below are quotes from an article from 1853 out of the Weekly Raleigh Register. That's an American newspaper. A Jew who had accompanied a German traveler as far as Timbuktu found near the boundary of Bambara a large number of Jewish Negroes. Nearly every family among them possesses the law of Moses written upon parchment. The explanation which they give of themselves in connection with their black skin is this, that after the destruction of Jerusalem at the time of the captivity, some of their ancestors, having neither goods nor land, fled to the desert. The fatigue which they endured so great that nearly all the females died by the way. The children of Ham received them with kindness, and by intermarriage with their daughters, who were black, communicated their color to their children. These children became generation by generation of a deeper hue until no differences of color now distinguish the children of Shem and those of Ham. A book from the 18th century called A System of Universal Geography, or a description of all parts of the world. This book is by two French travelers, Conrad Montbrun and James Gates Percival. They were French travelers who traveled around Africa during the time of the slave trade and documented the tribes in Africa. While traveling through the kingdom of Luango, which is present-day Congo, they wrote, "The kingdom of Luango contains Black Jews scattered throughout the country. They are despised by the Negroes who do not even deign to eat with them. They are occupied in trade and keep the Sabbath so strictly that they do not even converse on that day. They have a separate burying ground, very far from any habitation. The tombs are constructed with masonry and ornamented with Hebrew inscriptions." The historical account from the 1700s describes the connection between West Africans and the Israelites. In this account, it is from an African man from the Igbo tribe of Nigeria named Aluda Aquino. He was kidnapped from Nigeria and was enslaved in Barbados and Virginia. He was somehow able to purchase his freedom and went on to become a writer and abolitionist. In his autobiography, he not only documented the horrors of slavery, but he also wrote about his culture back home during the slave trade. He detailed how his tribe practiced the same customs of the Jews in the Torah. "We practiced circumcision like the Jews and made offerings and feasts on that occasion in the same manner as they did. Such is the imperfect sketchy or the imperfect sketch my memory has furnished me with of the manners and customs of a people among whom I first drew my breath. And here I cannot forbear suggesting what has long struck me very forcibly, namely the strong analogy which even by this sketch, imperfect as it is, appears to prevail in the manners and customs of my countrymen and those of the Jews before they reached the land of promise, and particularly the patriarchs while they were yet in that pastoral state which is described in Genesis. Like the Israelites in their primitive state, our government was conducted by our chiefs or judges, our wise men and elders, and the head of a family with us enjoyed a similar authority over his household with that which is ascribed to Abraham and the other patriarchs. The law of retaliation obtained almost universally with us as with them. And even their religion appeared to have shed upon us a ray of its glory, though broken and spent in its passage, or eclipsed by the cloud with which time, tradition, and ignorance might have enveloped it. For we had our circumcision, a rule, I believe, peculiar to that people. We also had our sacrifices and burnt offerings, our washings and purifications. on the same occasion as they had. To this day, our people back in Africa still have an oral history of how we migrated from Israel to West Africa and still practice those customs. Nigeria, Africa. The Igbo Jews. In Nigeria, the tribe called the Igbo say that they were, or they are, Jews and practice the same customs of the Jews of the Bible. And it's funny, family, there is a interview with, T.D. Jakes, indicating, or him admitting to being an Igbo. So he can trace his family back to Nigeria and the Jews of the Igbo, or are the Igbo. Here's a quote from a CNN article below about them. King Eri, like many, claims that the Igbo are the Jews of West Africa. They believe they are descendants of at least one of Israel's lost tribes. In the 8th century BC, the Assyrians invaded Israel's northern kingdom, forcing 10 tribes into exile. Historians say it is not unlikely that these tribes migrated westward to Africa. So the Igbo claim to be one of the northern tribes of the house of Israel. And until we are together again, I love you. I love you. I love you. To be continued. Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit.